A dynamic block for focal fabrics or panels is coming up next on My First Quilt. Hi there, I'm Sarah Gallegos and you're watching My First Quilt, and today we're talking about an attic windows block, and we're using that to frame in a focal fabric or a panel. It's a really nice block to use to kind of set apart a special fabric. Sometimes we've got those fabrics that have a big beautiful print that we're just afraid to cut up. This is a nice place for that, and again, you can also use it for panels. So what we're looking at with the block is this right here. This is our block. So you've got your main fabric and then two border prints. Now, when you're choosing fabrics, you're going to select one dark border print that's going to be kind of the top of each of your windows, and then you can choose what you want for your side windows. You could mix this up, you could use all the same. I actually used a gradiated fabric, so I got a little bit of variation, but without having to pick so many fabrics. So let's talk about how these blocks come together. Our block starts with a large rectangle of our focal fabric. So here I've got this fun little Parisian print fabric, but again, this could be a panel or a big floral. I'll show you another option for that shortly. Then we need to select, like I said, what are going to be the borders. So here I've got my black. I've actually got a black batik that I've used for my top border, and then my gradiated fabric for the sides. I love playing with those sorts of fabrics. Now, this is almost our complete block, but we do need a half square triangle unit in that top left corner just to kind of marry those two border prints together. This is all it takes to create this block. So you're going to stitch the top border print to the main piece, your half square triangle unit to your side border, and then it's just putting the block together. So we'll move these out of the way. I've got this here where I've already stitched my top border on and this unit together. Now we just sew our side seam. I pressed my seam allowance toward the top border fabric, and then on the sides I pressed toward the side border, and that allows me just to nest the seams where that half square triangle unit meets the top border fabric on my block. And now it's just a 1/4 inch seam. All right, so we'll open that up. And there is our block. You can just square it up and put about 9 of these together and you've got an amazing quilt. And it's quick and simple. I'd like to show you another option that you could use with your fabrics. I really liked making this quilt, and I've got an idea for another one that I want to make, and I want to just kind of walk through the process with you as I'm deciding which fabrics to work with. So I've got kind of a group of fabrics here. They look a little wild together, and this is a fun, safe place to use a wild group of fabrics. Now, these don't all come from one collection. I know that sometimes when we're a beginner, we kind of tend to stick within the collections in maybe your favorite quilt shop, or fat quarter bundles where they're all coordinated and go together. But in this particular grouping, I've got several different collections represented. These two I think are from the same. They're both a K Fawcett, but this is just a different Free Spirit group called Roaring Twenties. And then because I love playing with those gradiated fabrics, I've got this one in here, which is actually a gradiated dot. So it goes from heavier dots toward the bottom and lighter dots toward the top, so it's kind of a fun one to play with, and I think that might be really cool in those side borders on this quilt. So you can kind of pull together a group of fabrics that you just like the colors or the looks of, and then sort of start to play with where they might be best used. So you could take your large floral, I know that this will probably be the main print for me, and then just kind of lay fabrics next to it that you think might work for the different borders. So if I've got my floral here, I could maybe try a stripe for one of the side borders. Only thing with stripes is if it's going to drive you crazy, you've got to make sure that you cut it straight. I'm one of those people, so I would probably, in this particular quilt, use it for a border or a backing or even the binding. So I've got a quilt sort of cut out up here. I'm going to move these guys out of the way. And here I have what I think that I like the very best, and that's my large floral prints for that main portion. I've got just a black and white for the side, and then this fabric that reads just a little bit darker for that top border. To really get the effect of that attic windows block, you do want to make sure that you've got some heavy contrast between the top border and the side border. It's not necessarily as important to have the contrast with that main fabric, but for those two borders, that's what gives you that depth of field in that particular block. And when you're working with a large floral like this, you can kind of spend a little little bit of time auditioning placement too. Do you want to center your flower right in the very center of your block? When you're working with a panel, oftentimes, yes, we do want to center it because we're cutting around different elements within the panel. When I'm working with a large floral, I think it's a little bit more visually appealing if I've got things kind of offset center. So I've got sort of a focal fabric to the left and above center a little bit. I've got another sort of focal flower down here, and then this guy sort of gets cut off on the side, and I think that that's visually pleasing in the block. So take a little bit of time when you're playing with your fabrics for this particular sort of quilt, because you really do have a focal and just sort of audition placement. You could take a larger square ruler and kind of see where things line up and where they end. That kind of helps you to visualize a frame around your fabrics. Even though this is a rectangular block, then make sure that you cut the rectangular size. Or you could work with just folding your fabrics into those rectangles to see what you really like. I hope I've given you the courage and the confidence to head on into your local quilt shop or your fabric stash to find a really fun focal fabric to play with and create your own Moody Views quilts. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. My First Quilt is brought to you by Baby Lock, Madeira, and Hobbs Batting.